Okay, first things first. Things that get on one's nerves, recurring over a period of days, weeks, months. Sort them. Otherwise they build up like a backlog in a drain, and you say to yourself every day, I'm going to clear that drain, and then something distracts you. You don't get around to it. You get the plunger thing out, you pick about, you don't do the job properly. You might not be able to see this. There's a coffee stain on this desk. Every day I've sat here for 2 or 3 weeks. I thought I'm going to do something about that stain, and it just disturbs my whole mental equilibrium to keep glancing at it. But when I'm trying to finish the magazine I do, you're always thinking, get more pages done, get more pages done. Everything else occupies a lower position in one's list of priorities. Today's a great day. Why? Because I have a dishcloth in my hand. I've managed to bring it up from the kitchen, 2 floors below where I'm now sitting in the loft. Coffee stain gone. Dishcloth goes down the stairs. Joy. Right, what else? I've just finished James O'Brien's book, How They Broke Britain. This won't endear me to everybody. I've probably lost 500,000 viewers already, but never mind. I'm now reading this. Foolproof by Sander van der Linden. Never heard of him? Neither have I. Professor of something at Cambridge. Obviously highly intelligent, highly educated man. I'll tell you what he is. Sander van der Linden is the Professor of Social Psychology in Society and Director of the Cambridge Social Decision Making Laboratory and the Department of Psychology at the University of Cambridge. It's Cambridge, England, not Massachusetts. He is often dubbed Cambridge's defence against the dark arts teacher, and his pioneering research on fake news, misinformation, science denial, and the psychology of influence and persuasion is world-renowned. He currently resides in Cambridge, UK, as I said. It's one of the best books I've ever read. And it's one of the most... I haven't finished it yet. I've got that far. It looks at what's going wrong with our society. I think perhaps in some ways the most fundamental thing that's going wrong. And it's people's brains disintegrating. When I was a child, I thought, well, we must be scared of the Russians. Or the Chinese, even in those days. There was always something to be scared of. I was really born in the Cold War, 52. But nowadays, and the Chinese, or the Russians in particular, may not be unrelated to this. In fact, I think they've got a lot to do with it. People's minds disintegrating, believing the utterly improbable, believing absolute nonsense, is probably the greatest threat to us. In 2011, I think it was the CIA or the FBI were tasked with establishing what were the greatest threats to America and to democracy. And they concluded that it was not Russia per se or China. It was international crime. And my belief is that international crime lies behind a lot of the disinformation which these days has caused people to believe absolute gibberish. I'm inclined to think that Putin is behind a lot of it, but not Putin in isolation, and not exactly Russia, the state or the people, but the cabal that currently run it. And as Putin says himself he can't challenge NATO militarily, it's ridiculous. Apparently he's got an economy the size of Italy's. Staggering, isn't it, when you've got such a big country, but apparently that's the case. Spends a bit more of it on the army. But anyway, I suspect that he's been behind a great deal of the disinformation because he recognises that divide and conquer is a tactic that has worked for centuries throughout the entire history of human warfare, I suppose. But it's much cheaper to engineer than conventional military equipment, its development and purchase and maintenance. And it's how you can destroy and bewilder, confuse and emasculate a far superior force. I don't know if he's going to get into this at all, but what he asks in this book is why we fall for misinformation and how do we build immunity to it. So I'm only 50 odd pages into it, but it's one of those books that you read much like James O'Brien's, where you just think, yes, yes, yes. And you may say, well, I just want to read what I agree with. Everybody does. Most people do. But I recognise in myself, I recognise in this text, how I sometimes am influenced by disinformation. I've always been concerned about the environment for even longer than I've been concerned about motorcycling liberties. I never had anything to do with motorcycling in a social sense, or never dreamed of motorcycling in a political context until the helmet law was introduced in 1973. And that challenged my whole way of life, even though I wore a helmet. But what he's dealing with here is far broader, and it challenges everything. Well, the environment is where everybody lives. So the reason I've always been concerned about the environment is extremely simple, and I would suggest my logic is unassailable. It's where I live. Jack over there, you can't see him at the moment, he's lying on a cushion. We'll have a look at him at the end of this video, which won't last much longer. He lives in the environment. Every animal, every fish, every bird, every insect, they all live in the environment, and we're all interdependent. So you can't put the environment in a little box over there and say, I don't care about the environment, I only care about my freedom to do this or that or the other. It's just madness. So to take against people who are champions, defenders of environmental causes, it's almost like taking against gravity. You're going to lose, and you're always going to fight uphill. So it's dumb on every level. Everybody, every other interest in the world, motorcycling, must advance its arguments in conjunction with, or in recognition of, environmental necessities. Because that's where we all live, and it sustains everything. It's obvious. When I was 8, I was always fascinated by the gorilla. I wanted to be a gorilla. I decided my brother was a gorilla. He was unusually strong. He was 5 years older than me. And I still refer to him as a gorilla. Perhaps because the gorilla is, to look at, our closest relative, arms and legs. A gorilla can do pretty much anything we can do. I could still ride a motorcycle. I need an even lower seat because they've got short legs. But I'd have no problem at all with very high bars or very wide bars. And if the bike fell over, no trouble picking it up. Great. So there's a lot to be said for being a gorilla, and I'll revisit that in a future broadcast. But I said to my mother then, if we just keep on, the population keeps on growing and growing. There seemed to be more about that back in the early 60s, or late 50s, than there is today. It's so obviously unsustainable because the Earth's still the same size. So the population keeps growing. You can't get indefinite consumption of the Earth's resources if your population won't stop growing. You can't reconcile the finite nature of the Earth in terms of the material that comprises it, or the vegetables and food sources that it can provide to us, and everything else that we need, if the population just keeps on growing. It's difficult to imagine a more fundamental and more unassailable truth than that. N'est-ce pas? I wax pretentiously French. So I'll leave you with that, and we'll just have a look at Jack to see if he agrees. Jack, would you like to contribute? If I can ever find him. Jack, would you like to say anything to the audience? I hope that's pointing at you. Jack is reserving his judgment for future broadcasts. Okay. You have a nice snooze. I've got to go around to the Blue Cedar workshops and get a printout of some letters to transport for London. Bye for now. Raining out there.